This week on Who Deserves to Be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we look at the case for putting Echo and the Bunnymen into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week, we take a look at putting the Liverpool, England band Echo and the Bunnymen into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since they've actually been eligible since 2005. The group consisted of Ian McCullough, Will Sargent, Lee Pattinson, and Pete DeFreitas. Pete unfortunately passed away in a motorcycle accident back in 1989, but had quit the band a couple of years earlier. The group took a break for a few years in the mid-1990s before getting back together, and they still continue to tour and put out albums to this day. As we usually do, we take a look at the commercial side of things, and then we look at the influence. Stats first. To the tail of the tape we go. Echo and the Bunnymen released 13 studio albums, 10 live albums, 9 compilation albums, and 8 EPs. Of those, 6 of them charted on the American charts, with only 2 of those getting above the number 100 on the charts. 1984's studio album Ocean Rain made it to number 87, and 1987's self-titled album was their highest charting, topping out at number 51. Echo and the Bunnymen's commercial success came in their native UK. And that is where they had 9 of their studio albums, 2 of their EPs, and 2 of their compilation albums all go top 40, including having 5 of their studio albums and 1 of their compilation albums going into the top 10. 1981 sophomore studio album Heaven to Hear hit number 10. 1983's album Porcupine made it to number 2. 1984's Ocean Rain and 1987's self-titled album both made it to number 4. 1997's Evergreen went to number 8, and their 1985 compilation album Songs to Learn and Sing topped out at number 6 in the UK. In America, none of their albums sold over 500,000 copies. In the UK, though, 4 of their studio albums and 1 of their compilation albums went gold, with 1 of their studio albums and 2 of their compilation albums going silver. 1981's Heaven to Hear is considered one of the 500 greatest albums of all time, at least according to Rolling Stone magazine. Echo and the Bunnymen also released 30 singles. Of those, only 2 charted in America, and both were on the alternative charts, not the pop charts. 1990's Enlighten Me hit number 8, and 1997's I Want to Be There went to number 26. As you would figure, their success in the UK was much better. 14 of their songs went top 40, with 3 of their songs going top 10. 1983's The Cutter went to number 8, 1984's The Killing Moon went to number 9, and 1997's Nothing Lasts Forever went to number 8. Their only song to sell a lot of copies, though, was The Killing Moon, which went gold. One part of my criteria for induction is that you had to have made your mark commercially. We'll grade this one a C, we'll say. They didn't do anything in America, so grade F there. And that's partially their fault because they actually didn't do a lot of touring in America. In fact, when they toured, they would only play maybe 20 tour dates in the States, and that was it. They really did not want to tour a lot in America. So you can blame their lack of success in the States on that. You could also blame their lack of success in the States for their multiple record labels' failures in promoting them properly as well. That was a major issue. They've had a lot of mid-level success in their native UK, so we're going to grade that part of the whole thing a grade B. In fact, I suspect if it wasn't for college radio, knowledgeable record store clerks who were into what was considered obscure music back in the day, along with MTV playing them in the 1980s, then probably barely anybody outside of Europe would have even have heard of them. It's not like these days when you could go online and find the latest artist breaking out in South Korea or India, let's say. Your avenues for finding indie bands back in the day, as we like to say, were extraordinarily narrow back then. It was essentially record store owners, maybe college radio, probably MTV. That was it. All right, so that's not the greatest of grades there. So let's look at their influence. Echo and the Bunnymen came out of the post-punk movement, mixed it with new wave, sprinkled in some atmospheric styles and romanticism, and became one of the pioneers of the neo-psychedelic music movement back in the early 1980s. And that movement became one of the movements that helped to lay the foundation for the 1990s alternative rock explosion. Echo and the Bunnymen's style can be heard in songs by artists like Coldplay, Radiohead, The Killers, The Verve, The Psychedelic Furs, The Church, and Love and Rockets. Therefore, grade A on the influence level. All right, so they had some success in Europe, a small cult following in America with guys like me. They helped to pioneer a new genre, and they influenced major bands, including Radiohead, who were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That hits a lot of my criteria. So, what is the argument for keeping them out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Well, for starters, that lack of success in America. That plays into the voters' thought patterns that, rightly or wrongly, if you didn't break through in America, then really, did you even exist? The Hall voters seem to have that type of bias. They seem to not like anything that did not make it big in America. Go figure. They also seem to not like certain genres like heavy metal, progressive, and alternative rock. That makes absolutely no sense, I realize, when you think about it, because it leaves out a bunch of legendary artists, but that's the Hall for you. In the end, based on those biases against international artists who are critically acclaimed but don't make it big in the United States, I'm afraid, unfortunately, that it's going to be a long time before the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducts Echo and the Bunnymen, probably even putting them up for nomination again. Although they do deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.